and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm Laurie Bull. Recently, Governor Wolf delivered his budget address to the General Assembly, and his speech gives us the first glimpse at how he plans to govern Pennsylvania. New taxes, borrowing, and spending all combine into a budget plan that totals more than $33 billion. Can Pennsylvania afford the Wolf budget? Joining me to discuss this is Representative Jim Christiana of the 15th District in Beaver and Washington counties. Welcome.
Hi, Laurie. Thanks for having me.
Sure, and I guess to start off, first of all, we do have to recognize that this is the governor's plan, and it is just a starting point and a blueprint. You serve on the Appropriations Committee, so you're kind of on the front lines here. Can you tell your constituents, can you explain what that means at this time of the year to be on that committee?
Yeah, it's actually a tremendous privilege to serve on there for 4 years now, and this year's a little unique. The governor's proposal, to put it mildly, is extreme. It's an extreme increase in spending, and but as you mentioned, and I think it's fair to say, the governor mentioned it, this is a starting point, and over the next 3 weeks we will do legislative hearings and appropriation hearings. Our Senate colleagues will be doing the same, and ultimately this committee is assigned to introduce and hopefully pass another on-time budget.
The governor's proposal, by his numbers, is a $29.8 billion budget, claiming 2% growth. That doesn't sound bad until you see the true number is actually 33.8 and 16% growth. How does he make those numbers work?
Well, he doesn't.
Okay.
To be honest, you can't say that it's a 2% growth, but then on top of it, we're going to have another, $5 billion in taxes and spending. The governor has put out a lot of shiny objects. It's really easy, I think, for a governor to throw out spending increases. There's a lot of things that I think the public and the General Assembly would like to make increased investments in, but we ultimately have to be able to afford it. And unlike Washington, we have to pass a balanced budget, hopefully on time, like the last 4 years. And the governor has started a dialogue, without a doubt, but one that seems like there's a lot of work ahead of us, because the Republicans in the House, and I'm sure in the Senate, don't really have an appetite for a $4 to $5 billion tax increase.
And I guess the disparity in numbers comes from the fact that he's moving some of this money into different accounts, which kind of makes it look like he's not spending as much.
The governor says it's innovative, this is an innovative budget, but to be honest, I feel like he's just taking some old initiatives off the shelf that were around in the Rendell administration, took what is a really good bill, in my opinion, in House Bill 76, took about half of it, which is, the elimination of property taxes by House Bill 76, and it's a shift, but he just took all the revenue increases and forgot to eliminate the property taxes, and the result would be a substantial tax increase. So he's held out some shiny objects, I think, to distract the public, some great things like property tax reduction, but he really hasn't put a realistic plan together to afford this spending plan.
Let's talk about that. What you mentioned, that it's a comparable plan to House Bill 76. He's talking about raising income taxes and sales tax and applying sales tax to things that aren't currently taxed in exchange for property tax relief. But the difference is relief as opposed to elimination. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, oftentimes, Laurie, I tell people I'm really not interested in property tax relief. I'm interested in property tax elimination. And House Bill 76 was meant to eliminate, once and for all, one of the most anti-American taxes on the books, and that's property taxes. And I had a constituent literally lose her home because of a $6 late fee. She paid off her mortgage with her husband's life insurance policy, and sure enough, she lost her home because of a $6 late fee. The point is that a lot of us think property taxes need to go. But what the governor did was he took a really good proposal, in my opinion, and then just kind of used it for his own political gain. He used it to raise taxes. He wanted to raise the personal income tax. Laurie, he says that he's raising the personal income tax to reduce property taxes. That's half true. He also said he wants to increase the sales tax and expand the sales tax, but that's not for property tax elimination or reduction. That's to fund the pension that he's unwilling to discuss. So the governor, I think, just held out a shiny object, called it property tax, distracted people, and now we're left actually looking at the plan whether or not it makes sense, and so far it doesn't make much sense.
Speaking of that, if your constituents are interested in finding out if it makes sense for them in their school district, there's a website, www.taxpayersthatpay.com, and constituents can go on there, check by their school district or by their county, and see whether or not this makes sense for them. And I think in most cases it seems that it does not.
I agree. I think maybe there's some winners in this plan, but overall, this is a massive tax increase. It's a massive tax increase on the middle income. When you raise the sales tax and expand the sales tax, that hurts the most vulnerable and the poor. And so when you look at the numbers, and listen, I agree with you. I think it's best for people to go on the website. Don't take my word for it. Don't take the governor's word for it. Actually look at the tax and the spending, and they'll decide whether or not it makes sense for them.
Shifting to something that maybe you can find some common ground on, he did make some business tax reform proposals. Your thoughts on those proposals?
Well, once again, this isn't innovative, I don't think, by the governor. He took some conservative ideas and said that he was, going to support those and reducing the corporate net income tax, which many of us understand that it is a hindrance to job creation in Pennsylvania. We're the second highest in the nation. So he wants to reduce that, but in the same sense, he wants to put the highest severance tax in the nation on the natural gas industry. The same industry that is keeping our head above the water as far as I'm concerned, especially in western Pennsylvania. This industry is creating tens of thousands of jobs. It's making us energy independent to the Middle East and to Russia, saying, you know what, you keep your oil, we don't want it. And then we have a governor who comes in and he doesn't just want to tax it, he wants to punish it and tax it higher than any other state in the country. And so this is the difficult situation that I think the governor is in. He says he's for reducing corporate taxes to create jobs, but then he's also championing the highest severance tax in the nation.
And certainly that's something he campaigned on, the idea of that severance tax. In your mind, does the public misunderstand a little bit about how the industry is taxed?
Well, I definitely think the governor has made this about a tax revenue amount. He's predicting a revenue source of $1 billion. It's interesting, though, when you look at the last 12 months, last February, the governor was saying this 5% tax will generate $5.5 million. 3 months later, $700 million. And now he's saying this is the same tax is going to bring in $1 billion or more. The problem is the price of natural gas has fallen by 50%, and that is a significant driver to tax revenue. So the problem I see is the governor keeps talking about this revenue amount, this expected revenue that he's going to put into education, and he introduces it with a backdrop of a school behind him. Great marketing, but the problem is we have to balance a budget and pass a budget, and there's no way his tax proposal even comes close to that. Not to mention he's risking the impact fee that a lot of areas, like in Washington County and Beaver County, they're relying on that because they're seeing increased cost with the natural gas industry. That's why we put the impact fee. Governor wants to take that away, send it to Harrisburg, and then he'll decide whether or not it gets driven back. And I think it's bad public policy.
You mentioned education. I mean, that's certainly something everyone is concerned about and everyone cares about, but there may be different ideas of what is an appropriate amount for funding schools and how to go about that. What's your thought on the pension problem, which is probably the biggest issue right now in education?
Lori, the governor talked about a lot of issues in the budget address, and I think we all just kept waiting and waiting. The number one cost driver in our state budget is the pension crisis, and a lot of us have understood that it is a crisis. And how the number one cost driver in our budget right now completely flew under the radar for the most part. The governor's realistically not interested in pension reform, which I don't know how the next generation can afford this monstrosity of an unfunded liability. I think it's just another example. House Republicans, Senate Republicans have to lead on this issue, just like the liquor privatization. It's about time we get out of that business, and the governor seems to be on the sidelines on that issue too. And these are two of the biggest issues facing Pennsylvania, in my opinion, and the governor is just unwilling to talk about it. He says it's innovative, but we've heard politicians say more money, more money, more money. And for every dollar that he raises taxes to throw into education that's being eaten up by the pension system is not helping our kids get a better education. So the governor, I think, has to come to the table on this one and put a plan together on how to reduce our pension costs. Because we all want to see higher classroom investments. We all want to see more teachers and lower teacher-student ratios. But the problem is that's not where the money's being spent. And when we rank in the top 10 states, people don't understand, I don't think, because the governor's been talking about this $1 billion cut. Pennsylvania ranks in the top 10 states of per pupil spending. The problem is it's not getting into the classroom. It's going to pensions. It's going to 7,000 full-time administrators. These cost drivers, the governor's not even talking about. He just wants to throw more and more money at the problem.
And I know there's a group studying the school funding formula, and I'm sure that's something that the legislature's kind of waiting on their report to kind of hear what may come of that as well. Your thoughts on changing that formula?
I think this is one of the most optimistic issues right now in Harrisburg because there's so much bipartisan support. I think Republicans and Democrats both understand that our funding formula is completely messed up, and we need to hit the reset button. And I think that funding commission will hopefully come back with a recommendation of how we can reset and start investing in kids and not in zip codes. And this inequality of the way we spend money really has to stop. I think funding education based on zip codes is the discrimination of the 21st century. And I don't say that lightly, because if you look around the Commonwealth, the areas that are being affected the most are the poorest, those that don't have an alternative. They can't pack up and move into a good school district. They can't afford a private school tuition. So those, I think, that is a really a bright spot, I think, in this legislative session, is that we have such an opportunity to make a monumental reform. And Harrisburg doesn't often, they don't often do the tough things and the big things, but I think this is one we might get done.
Well, that sounds great. Just to wrap up here, what principles guide you when you go to make that vote for the budget? Are there certain things you're looking for, whether it's no tax increases or no borrowing? What types of things guide you as you vote?
Well, I think the first thing for me is, what have we done to spend more efficiently? Before I can ask John or Jane in my district to give us more money in Harrisburg to spend, what can I go back and say we've done better or we've done more efficiently? I can't, it's hard for me to ask. I won't ask them for another dime in taxes to fund an outdated pension system that nobody in the real world has seen in 10, 15 years. So until we do that, I can't ask them to pay higher taxes if we're still in the liquor business. We're one of only 2 states that have a government-run monopoly. And I also don't want to punish the industries that are creating jobs and making us energy independent so that we can tell Russia and the Middle East we don't need their oil. Those things, I think, are going to guide me for as long as the people keep sending me here.
Well, that sounds good. And hopefully we'll look at a June budget and on time, and we'll see what happens. But there's a lot of work ahead for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much. And that is all the time we have for today's program. If you need assistance with any state matter, feel free to contact Representative Christiana at his local office or through his website. That information will be shown in just a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us next time for another edition of Legislative Report.